This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. In case you're wondering, my show prep routine includes drinking 3 cups of coffee and telling myself you will become Bernard Shaw in the mirror for 10 straight minutes. Here's what we got for y'all. In the final stretch of the race for the White House, President Trump's taxes are taking center stage. We dip into the biggest takeaways from the New York Times expose, plus a preview of what to expect from the big debate night Tuesday. But first, here's what you need to know right now. The global death toll from coronavirus nears 1 million people. More than a fifth of those deaths have come from the US. 205,000 Americans have died from the virus. According to the CDC, that makes COVID-19 now the 3rd leading cause of death in the US, behind heart disease and cancer. This weekend, health experts warned of an alarming trend. National hospitalization rates were starting to tick back up, and new case records were set in several Midwest states. Florida topped 700,000 cases Sunday. Just 2 days before that, the governor lifted all restrictions on businesses, pushing the state into phase 3 of reopening. Over the weekend, the president announced Judge Amy Coney Barrett as his pick to fill the vacant Supreme Court seat, and Senate Republicans are eager to get the ball rolling on a confirmation process. Hearings are scheduled to start October 12th and will wrap up in 16 days or less. But there is some doubt that the Republicans will be able to pull off the abbreviated timeline. There were 48 days between the nomination of Justice Neil Gorsuch and his confirmation hearing in 2017, and 57 days between the nomination of Justice Brett Kavanaugh and his hearing. Not to mention, no Supreme Court nominee has ever been confirmed after the month of July during a presidential election year. Barrett, a 48-year-old federal appeals court judge, has publicly expressed views similar to those of longtime conservative Justice Antonin Scalia. If she's confirmed, Barrett would be a 6th conservative-leaning voice on the 9-person court. 2 new California wildfires exploded in size overnight heading into Monday. The Glass Fire tore through parts of Napa Valley's wine country. Meanwhile, the Zog Fire burned through 7,000 acres in less than 5 hours in the northern part of the state. Crews are battling 25 major wildfires, and weather conditions aren't going to be much help this week. A heat wave in the state is combining with dry winds, heightening the risk of wildfires. The National Weather Service issued a red flag warning for nearly all of Northern California. According to CAL FIRE, wildfires have killed at least 26 people and burned through more than 3.7 million acres this year. Our first story tonight is probably an obvious one, considering it's dominating the news cycle. A New York Times investigation revealed that President Trump didn't pay federal income taxes in 10 of 15 years starting in 2000, and only paid $750 in federal income taxes the year he became president and his first year in the White House. But that ain't it. Newsy's Bianca Fascini breaks down some of the key takeaways from that investigation.
President Trump is hitting back against a New York Times report claiming he paid just $750 in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017.
It's fake news. It's totally fake news. Made up, fake.
The report, out just days before the first presidential debate, also says the president paid no income taxes at all in 10 of the past 15 years. It highlights questionable deduction tactics, like writing off $70,000 to have his hair done during his reality television show, The Apprentice.
I would love to see more. I think it raises more questions than answers.
Unlike his predecessors, President Trump has refused to release his tax returns. He also waged a legal battle to keep them hidden. After the report came out, he did say he would eventually release them, but didn't say when.
But I will tell you that I look forward to releasing that. I look forward to releasing many things. I'm going to release many things, and people will be really shocked.
The Times report has also cast a spotlight on an IRS audit into a $72.9 million tax refund he received, which could result in a steep penalty for gross negligence.
For it to go to that criminal threshold, you have to be able to show intent.
Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden immediately seized on the news, coming out with an ad comparing President Trump's tax bill to the average American's. It's likely to be brought up Tuesday night, with the economy being one of the debate's main topics. Bianca Fascini, Newsy, Washington.
We're going to give you a moment to figure out how much you've paid in taxes over the recent years. When you're back, we'll show you how not to season your food. Ever have your Instagram heroes kind of let you down? That's what's about to happen here. This is what's trending now. Yesterday's meme is today's public health violation, as a restaurant opened just a week ago in Boston by the man known as Salt Bae was forced to close by city officials for violating COVID-19 rules. A little know your meme catch up here. This is Salt Bae and the video that gained him his fame and his name. Apparently, stylishly garnishing steak is enough to springboard your career as a restaurateur. Things apparently got a little too social at his restaurant New Strip, Boston, after health officials witnessed overcrowding, little social distancing, and restaurant staff without face masks. After multiple violations, one city councilor says he's gonna push to suspend the restaurant's alcohol license indefinitely. And no, I'm not gonna make a joke about anybody being salty. Wait a second. Ivanka Trump is trending after the New York Times bombshell report showed how President Trump reduced his taxable income by claiming his daughter as a consultant and paying her more than $700,000 in consulting fees, then deducted that as a business expense. This is news not just because it involves powerful people, but because many of us were today years old when we learned that paying our kids consulting fees and then using that to cut down your taxes is something you can just do, I guess. Dad, are you hearing this? Do you need a consultant? I'm available. And something pretty special happened in sports over the weekend that kind of flew under the radar. With the Lakers topping the Denver Nuggets, LeBron James is now headed to his 10th NBA Finals series. That's 10 as in double digits. For some reference, Magic Johnson played in 9 finals, Michael Jordan played in 6, and in fact, only 3 other NBA players have ever made 10 or more finals appearances in sports history. And what makes LeBron's feat that much more impressive is that he did it with 3 different teams. That's called putting the team on your back. There are tons of unanswered questions for President Trump and Joe Biden going into tomorrow's presidential debate. How will Trump respond to questions about his taxes? How will Biden respond if Trump's attacks get personal? One thing we can be sure of is millions of people will be tuning in to see how it all plays out. Newsy's Andrew Rafferty tells us what we can expect from the first presidential debate of 2020.
It's appointment television for tens of millions of Americans, and interest in the first debate between President Donald Trump and Joe Biden may hit an all-time high on Tuesday ahead of one of the most unique elections in U.S. history.
We saw 4 years ago record viewership. That first presidential debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton drew more than 80 million viewers. Most watched debate in history of presidential debates. And I fully expect this interest and attention to continue, and particularly during the time that we're in.
President Trump enters the showdown as the underdog, trailing Biden by a significant margin nationally. His campaign struggling to overcome the negative marks his administration received from the U.S. response to the coronavirus. Biden takes the stage with a lead that looks much more modest in key battleground states and a campaign schedule that pales in comparison to the incumbent, a favorite attack line from the president.
I got a guy, he stays in his damn basement all day long, and I'm doing this.
Putting to rest any questions about Biden's readiness to lead will be a top priority for the Democrat during the 90-minute debate.
Joe Biden has to be careful, I think, that his usual style, much more reserved style, doesn't seem to just get lost where he fades away. If so, that would play into the Trump narrative of Joe Biden, as we've heard the taunts, Sleepy Joe, or he's not up for this task.
For President Trump, proving better days are ahead following a year ravaged by public health crisis and economic strife will be key. And time is running short for both candidates. Close to 1 million votes have already been cast, and legal battles are playing out across the country as states scramble to alter voting procedures amid the pandemic.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington.
Moderator Chris Wallace will focus on election integrity, racial injustice, the coronavirus, the economy, and not to mention the newly vacated Supreme Court seat both sides hope will motivate voters ahead of November.
To jam this nomination through the Senate is just an exercise in raw political power.
Despite potentially record viewership, polling shows most voters say their minds are made up, and a plurality, 44%, say the debate is not important in helping them make up their minds.
We've seen over time, generally, the ability to change, to move 2 to 3% of this large audience of these debate viewers. And boy, in a race, again, in those battleground states that show just a point or two separating, the ability to change 2 to 3% can make a difference.
Andrew Rafferty, Newsy, Cleveland.
Don't forget, you can catch special debate coverage live starting at 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, anywhere you stream Newsy.
As the coronavirus has quickly spread across the world,
a freeze on travel has the potential to reshape why people fly.
This halt in traditional entertainment highlights how viewers and creators are coping together.
Healthcare systems in the U.S. will need 3.5 billion masks.
The economic damage looks very different on either side of the Atlantic.
There are only about 117,000 beds nationwide.
When can we get back to normal?
Tens of thousands of people are having a pandemic experience unlike many others. They are participants in clinical trials to test potentially life-saving COVID-19 vaccines. One thing we've previously reported on is how diversity is valued in these vaccine trials. That's the only way to really know how vaccines will affect, let's say, the communities disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Newsy's Kat Sandoval spoke to one vaccine trial participant who was a Black woman about her experience.
It was not my intent to be involved at all, ever.
Bonnie Blue is Chicago's first COVID-19 vaccine participant and one of more than 25,000 people who have volunteered for the Moderna vaccine trial so far. She didn't intend to volunteer, but the rising death toll and an opportunity to save lives changed her mind.
My people typically are not very trustful, but what I'm looking at is you have to weigh it. Will you not do something that you really want to do to try to help humanity?
As a 68-year-old asthmatic Black woman, Blue fits into 3 high-risk categories for COVID-19. She spoke to us after she received her second and final injection.
It was like going to your primary care for a flu shot.
Because this is a blind study, Blue doesn't know if she received the vaccine or a placebo. For the next 2 years, researchers will study her body's reactions to the injections and if she's protected from COVID, although early trial results may be available later this year. Dr. Richard Novak, lead investigator of the clinical trial at the University of Illinois at Chicago, says there's a myth that the vaccine can give you the coronavirus, but that's simply not true.
The other common myth is that we give people the infection to see if the vaccine works. And that's also not true. Of course, we enroll people who are at risk for getting it, but if they get it, it's because they've acquired it naturally just by going about their lives.
Blue says she told her family and friends a few days before she volunteered.
They were not happy. My closest friends tried to talk me out of it.
She says her friends were concerned about her severe asthma and the history of racism in past clinical trials.
No one that I know of has volunteered because it's not our ancestors, it's our family that these things have happened to and continue to happen to on some level.
Blue gets about a $1,300 stipend to cover travel and her time for the 2 years. Participating in clinical trials still comes with a risk because you don't know how your body will react.
People think that it was a brave thing to do, but I don't see it that way. I just see it as this is something that was for me to do.
Kat Sandoval, Newsy, Chicago.
Most of us have gotten more than one vaccine at a time. They can range from tetanus to chickenpox to mumps. But now with a new COVID-19 vaccine in the works, some people are wondering if it's safe to get it with the flu shot. Newsy's Lindsay Thies got an expert's opinion on that question.
Flu
Flu vaccine manufacturers have raised production to record levels with nearly 200 million doses for the U.S. It's in preparation for what some doctors have called a twindemic, flu and COVID-19 season colliding. The CDC recommends people get a flu shot as early as September and October this season and as late as January. Only a few phase 3 COVID-19 vaccine trials are underway. Johnson & Johnson started theirs this week. Right now, little is known about how a flu and COVID-19 vaccine would work together if you could get both.
Biologically speaking, there should be no interaction between those two.
Virologist Dr. Andrew Prakash at Johns Hopkins says the flu shot does not protect someone against the coronavirus, but it wouldn't make someone more susceptible to it either. He says if someone got both a flu shot and a COVID-19 vaccine, once one's approved, they shouldn't have a bad reaction.
They're very different viruses that induce very different immune response.
Each year, about half the population gets a flu shot. The CDC is hoping that at least 60% of the population gets one this year. Health experts are watching closely, thinking flu shot numbers could be an indicator of how many people would get a COVID vaccine. But a new Newsy Ipsos poll found fewer people are interested in getting an FDA-approved coronavirus vaccine. 56% of those asked said they would be interested, but that's down from 69% when we asked less than 2 months ago. Dr. Daniel Salmon, an expert on vaccine safety, says much still has to be done to let the public know how safe an approved COVID-19 vaccine would be.
If this comes from science and evidence, and it's done with rigor and objectivity and transparency, and people see what makes the sausage, they should have confidence in the outcome.
Lindsay Thies, Newsy, Denver.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to give us a shout on Twitter using the hashtag NewsyInTheLoop. We would have asked you to hit us on TikTok, but things are a little weird with them right now. TikTok is still available for now. The company won a reprieve from a federal judge Sunday, the day a U.S. ban was supposed to go into effect. But the ban could still go forward, and according to some cybersecurity experts, the way the US is handling the TikTok deal challenges a decades-long approach to an open and free internet. Newsy's Tyler Adkison explains.
The Trump administration's TikTok ban may soon keep 100 million American users from accessing the app.
Whatever form the ban takes, experts tell Newsy it could have a long-term effect on US global tech relations.
We have been proponents of an open, interoperable, secure cyberspace. We've had something of a consensus, really since the 90s on the way that internet governance works. But with these orders, now the US government itself is kind of actively undermining that premise.
And now the US is sort of making the argument, well, we don't want, your technology coming into our borders, into our country, which is the exact opposite they made, argument they made 30, 40 years ago.
On a business level, the ban could push other countries to be more selective about which American tech companies can operate within their borders.
China historically has used national security as an excuse, right, to govern all kinds of behaviors. The fact that the U.S. government starts doing this absolutely could give precedent to other countries that want to restrict and certain, large social networks like Facebook.
Experts also told Newsy they saw the U.S. bans on Chinese tech as part of a new, more protectionist approach to data, driven by China's rise to become a global tech superpower.
All major powers are aware of the benefits of controlling the information and shaping the narrative. And this goes back forever, right? Certainly back to the Cold War, if that's a good starting point for all this, right? And nowadays this has moved into the internet because we're in the internet and web era. And some countries are very much about, sort of open borders when it comes to information.
If that fighting about where tech companies like Google or ByteDance can operate continues, other countries may be forced to choose between working with the U.S. or with China.
So, another situation like this that pops up, then the Chinese can maybe easily just say, okay, we're done, or, and then really start to push for this, almost like a bipolar technological world where, the West is using, the U.S. technology and the authoritarian countries maybe are using sort of China's technology.
It's a fascinating, early stages of a potential digital Cold War kind of playing out before our eyes, where these kind of fundamental questions about, all right, are we going to move into a realm of, maybe an Eastern and Western version of the internet, or even in an extreme example, 194 digital walled garden.
Tyler Adkisson, Newsy, Chicago.
The U.S. has seen more than 7 million coronavirus cases, and while survivors may have temporary immunity, a new study found that the majority of Americans are still susceptible to COVID-19. Newsy's Stephanie Sandoval has more.
Around 90% of the U.S. population could still be at risk of contracting COVID-19, especially minority communities. A new study from Stanford University and Ascend Clinical finds that about 9% of the U.S. adult population had COVID-19 antibodies as of July. A key takeaway from the study: higher COVID-19 infection rates were found in people living in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods, and densely populated metropolitan areas. The methodology: take test samples from patients undergoing dialysis.
They're a population that is that tends to be organically inclusive of people that we care to survey, like people who are racial and ethnic minorities.
The 28,000 patients studied were on treatment for end-stage kidney disease in 46 states.
If prevention efforts are rolled out, they need to specifically address these high-risk communities and need to be tailored to them.
Although they're considered high risk, dialysis patients undergo routine lab work, which made them an ideal test group.
That will allow us to track the evolution of SARS-CoV-2 spread over time.
Maria Montez Rath hopes the study will help others see if what they're doing to prevent community spread is actually working.
We have a way of being able to measure this. And really figure out what is the effectiveness of this vaccine.
This new research falls in line with what CDC Director Robert Redfield told Congress on Wednesday.
More than 90% of the population remains susceptible.
For Newsy, I'm Stephanie Sandoval.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow for more In the Loop and my predictable rotation of button downs. Same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.
We're working hard to get you the news you need. We dig a little deeper on the stories of the day. That's why we're here. To help start making sense of it all.
We take a step away from the noise and spin to really hear the stories that need to be told. Newsy cuts through.